Alright, hi Key. I didn't even know how to start this video. I'm really shit at making intros. But for the final video of the year, this is what it's going to be. I know I made some polls, suggested some other things, so sorry if this doesn't really hit the mark or the content you were expecting. So with that out of the way, let's get into the vid. So Thanos, pretty much considered like the apex of strength in the verse when it comes to the antagonists. Whether that's his physical power, military might, or Iron Man level intelligence, he remains an extremely formidable enemy against pretty much anyone in the verse. He's considered the strongest being in the universe by some members of the verse, which makes sense considering he's heavily implied to be an Eternal. And even in his first on-screen fight, we see that he takes away Hulk's title of being incredible by beating his ass and then KOing him, with it being said that the Mad Titan has incomparable strength within the novelization of Infinity War. He also has a myriad of statements that state he's the greatest or most formidable foe that the Avengers, Doctor Strange, or any of the relevant heroes have faced up until Infinity War and Endgame. With this remaining true, as Thanos just outright beats everyone he faces in the movie. In fact, the crazy thing about that is during his time fighting against the heroes on Titan, it stated that if Thanos had lost the gauntlet, then he still would have been all the heroes regardless.
Thanos trashed half the universe without the stones.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, he went from planet to planet slaughtering people. He's unbelievably powerful without the stones. I think they would have been very disappointed to get the glove off him and find he was still beating the living daylights out of them.
Later on during Avengers Endgame, he takes on two Thor-level enemies together in the form of Thor and Captain America, who jump him at the same time and ends up knocking them out right after anyway. And this is pretty wild considering that Thor at that point was stated to be the strongest he'd ever been. Meanwhile, we have Hela, who on her first appearance easily shatters Mjolnir, a weapon that was stated to be unbreakable and without equal. Concerning her history before this point though, we know that she assisted Odin in his conquest of the Nine Realms, with it being said that she was his most powerful weapon before settling into his benevolent ways. Not only would this put her above the likes of the Destroyer armor, but also above Gungnir, which is Odin's main weapon in battle, and was very much relative to Mjolnir during Thor's battle with Loki at the end of Thor 1. There's also no way I could talk about Hela in this vid and not mention the myriad of statements she has where it said she's the strongest foe that Thor has ever fought up until that point. This would include both Curse and Malekith, with the latter having his power amplified by the Reality Stone during the final act of Thor 2. This tells into a pretty crazy statement that comes from a piece of Japanese promotional material for Thor Ragnarok, where it states that Hela is the strongest enemy in history, with the most notable characters that this statement would encompass being both of the antagonists of the first two Guardians of the Galaxy movies, that being Ronan and Ego the Living Planet. Ego himself being a moon-sized planet in his true form and a member of the Celestials, albeit a potential lesser class of that race, as Feige implied that he would never seen the true and full power of a Celestial up until the Eternals movies. She also gets hit with Thor's biggest, strongest lightning bolt, and while the screenplay implies that she was knocked out, Thor says it ultimately did nothing to her.
I think we should disband the Avengers.
Hit her with a lightning blast.
I just hit her with the biggest lightning blast in the history of lightning and did nothing.
And that same lightning bolt was also seemingly bigger than the ones that Cap dropped on Thanos during their 1v1, with those smaller bolts doing a decent amount of damage to Thanos and his armor. Then we have the real kicker, which is despite Thor having undergone an intense training regimen and apparently becoming stronger than ever, per Chris Hemsworth's word, Taika Waititi made a statement after the release of Thor 4 that heavily implies that Hela is still the peak of power when it comes to the main antagonists in the Thor series. Now, whether or not this was made because the movie didn't do so well and Gore didn't have the aura that Hela had is, you know, it's up in the air, but it's still a very important piece of information to mention in a video like this. So to me, it seems like these two have a very similar amount of arguments. However, there are some issues with some of Thanos' scaling, with the main example being how all of his feats in Infinity War would have been done while he was passively amped by the Power Stone. Now, I know the Russo brothers said otherwise, but there are multiple statements saying the opposite, such as the statements from the official timeline guide, which is written from the perspective of the TVA, that say he was using the Power Stone against the Hulk, with the same guide stating that with each stone he himself became empowered by their energies. This guide also has a foreword from Kevin Feige, aka the president of Marvel Studios, where he states that the TVA is the main authority on the events of the sacred timeline. Then we have another statement regarding the use of the Power Stone in the Hulk fight, but the source of this is a sticker album surrounding the movie. Finally, there is the Marvel Studios 100 Objects Guidebook, which implies that Thanos was amped by the gauntlet, as that is one of the main reasons he survived getting impaled by Stormbreaker. This also makes sense when you take into account a statement made in the Infinity War art book, which states Thanos is using the stones at a level beyond the previous users, and this would include Ronan's use of the Power Stone, which passively boosted his strength and durability once it was merged into his hammer. As for the statement regarding Thanos without the gauntlet winning on Titan, we see that Thanos needed the gauntlet to combat Doctor Strange's more powerful spells, which included the use of the Mirror Dimension. So it would stand to reason, while he may have beaten weaker characters like Iron Man, Spider-Man, Star-Lord, etc., there's just no way he'd be able to counter being BFR'd to another universe via his own strength. In regards to the arguments being made for Hela, I think the main issue is her being said to be the strongest enemy in history, with this statement seemingly being hyperbolic in nature, as she's shown to be well below planet level, and the statement would also have to include Dormammu, a being that devours entire universes, something Hela is completely incapable of holding a candle to. It also depends on your stance on the power creep in the MCU, as I for one don't really think most of the characters get much stronger over time, with examples like the statements for Endgame Thor more so referencing his growth as a character, as alluded to in another interview. There are obvious exceptions to this, such as Iron Man and Doctor Strange, with the power of the latter being dependent on his knowledge and practice of the mystic arts. However, if you do think that the many characters presented on screen are constantly surpassing each other, with the help of various statements like how current Thor is said to be the strongest Avenger, which would put him above Captain Marvel in Endgame, and thus make him stronger than Thanos, if you think these statements are valid and not just examples of out-of-universe contradictions from biased authorities on the specific movies, then Hela would just end up as far above Thanos. We also know that while Thor was fully confident in facing Thanos, he knew he couldn't beat Hela.
Whatever game you're playing, it won't work. You can't defeat me.
No, I know. But he
And
can.
that's despite having renewed confidence, and with the help of one of Asgard's most elite warriors in the form of the Valkyrie, who is also apparently as strong as Thor if you take one statement into consideration. The same Valkyrie that was literally on the floor trying to crawl away from Hela, with the script saying that both her and Thor were exhausted from merely just trying to postpone Hela from getting to the ship with the Asgardian refugees. We also know that Hela was overconfident when fighting against Thor, even after he had hit her with his strongest attack, implying that she wasn't really taking the fight that serious. All this, and I've not even mentioned how Hela is effectively immortal while on Asgard, with a cracked healing factor and the ability to continue to increase in power while the battle goes on. It would take the complete destruction of the realm of Asgard for Hela to completely lose the immortality granted by her ties there, something that only Surtur was seemingly capable of doing. And even then he didn't survive the explosion. So I think by now you guys probably understand that I think Hela wins. Even if you think that the level of power she's shown in Thor 3 isn't as impressive as Thanos, there isn't such a giant gap in power to where she'd be unable to surpass him given enough time, with him being unable to kill her while the realm of Asgard exists. So I hope you guys enjoyed this topic. It's something that I started thinking about more in depth recently while making a tier list for the MCU with my friends. I also hope you enjoyed my YouTube content this year and continue to be patient and stick around with me for 2025. Thanks for watching, stay safe, and have a happy new year.